everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talk. And this episode is a special episode dedicated to mental health awareness, because May is the month of mental health awareness. And we are all honoring this topic. And we think that it is a very crucial topic that needs more attention. And that's why we have gathered here. And I'm so glad and I'm so honored to be joined by experts today who have already voiced about mental health through their efforts and through their different activities. So today we will be breaking the stigma, breaking the silence that is attached with mental health. And the reason why people are not seeking help is because of this bad stigma attached to it. They choose to suffer in silence, yet they don't seek help. And that's why we need to break the stigma. We need to initiate the conversation about this topic so people don't feel ashamed, people don't feel shy to seek help. So let's start our discussion. We have Mariah and Byron. We have Barbara, Vokita, Jennifer, Fraser, and Heather McWilliam. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today to discuss very crucial, very critical, important topic. Now, I will just ask each one of you to introduce yourself so our audience will get to know each one of you better. I will start from Mariah and Byron. So please introduce yourself.
Yes, Ambreen, thank you so much for having us on. And during Mental Health Awareness Month, this is a very, very timely and important topic. Yes, Mariah and I are TEDx speakers. We're public speakers. We're published authors. And we specialize, believe it or not, in mental health around the concept of neurodivergence and neuroprevalence, let's say. That's what we do.
Thank you. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, Mariah, you want to say something? Yeah.
I was just going to turn it over to Barbara to introduce herself.
Sure. Yes, Barbara, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ambreen, for this wonderful invitation. I am not in mental health field, so to speak, but I am discovering there is so much connection between mental health and education, more than ever, and we should realize it more. Therefore, I am here to support Ambreen's wonderful initiative. So I am an associate professor in upstate New York, but I am also a therapy dog handler. I like to call myself therapy dog partner because dogs are not used in therapy. They are included. They are partners with us, handlers. And I love to visit with my dog a local school, see what therapy animals can do in school, and they can do actually miracles that I witnessed myself. And I love to publish about it, what I've seen, including children's books in which my dog is, of course, a major character. So thank you so much for inviting me to this. And I am so happy to get to know everyone in the panel and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think it is directly linked with mental health because education and the way it is affecting kids and younger generation, we need to start talking about it. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ambreen. It's lovely to be here with everybody. It's a subject very close to my heart. I'm not educating anymore, working as a teacher. I did that for 20 years. I am now working as a consultant with different organizations, and I do a lot of presentations because I'm very keen to see people understand how much our mental health is profoundly correlated with our brain health. And so because I was involved in an abuse situation, I started to look at how all forms of abuse and bullying and harassment, including all the types that don't touch the body, I've been learning in the science how much they can do significant architectural damage to the brain and to brain function. And as an educator of 20 years, I never heard anybody talk about the brain. So I think it's really important to bridge that gap. And I have a PhD in comparative literature. So my training is to take different ways of thinking out of their silos, put them into the arena, and see how the conversation changes when all of a sudden we're talking to each other. So I look at education, organizational culture, workplace, and the neuroscience on bullying and abuse.
Wow, amazing. Your work is really amazing. And I've seen your recent talks and your, like, the way you've given, especially on neurosciences, was amazing. So looking forward to your insights on this topic as well. Heather, thank you for joining from Canada. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to meet all of you. And thank you so much, Ambreen, for having me. It's an honor. I absolutely love the title, Breaking the Silence. It's definitely one that's close to my heart. Just wanted to touch on the service dog or the therapy dogs. I have a dog, and she has tremendously changed my life. So I'm definitely an advocate of that. So my name is Heather McWilliam, and I'm the founder and CEO of Brave Inspires Brave. We're a global movement organization that's inspiring and building brave leaders of today and tomorrow. Our team is especially focused on supporting military and law enforcement veterans and their families in their transition into new leadership opportunities for personal development and post-traumatic growth. So that was developed from my experiences that I had as a police officer. I was a police officer for 20 years, and 10 years of that, I was a high-achieving, successful police officer within the RCMP and also within Toronto Police, the largest police service in Canada. And so the next 10 years of my career, I spent advocating for mental health awareness and disability rights because I had experienced so much trauma within the workplace from sexual harassment, and really just understood the larger picture and how the culture, police culture, was affecting both the police officers and as well the community on that front. And so within the next 10 years of my life, I shouldn't say 10 years, maybe like 6 to 7 years. I spent attending the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal to stand up for human rights and disability rights for not only myself, but police women and other people in the workplace. And so within that experience, I faced a lot more trauma and violence in that experience with reprisals. So my mental health, although I was diagnosed with something to face in the beginning when I took time off work to understand it, it then became so much more exacerbated on so many levels. And so my heart really lies in the field of health, wellness, leadership, holistic practices, and really making sure that everyone has access to that education and that awareness, and that we can make change and save lives that way.
Yeah. You're amazing, especially your journey is very inspiring, and the way you are actually helping people, your efforts are truly exceptional. And it is actually, as I always say, it's paving the way for others to actually, it gives them courage to follow your path. So thank you for all your efforts. So let's start our discussion. And since like it is about that, how we can break the silence. So let's first talk about it, that what is this stigma and why it is associated with it? So I'll ask this question to Mariah and Byron, since like you've been doing a lot on this topic. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambreen. And some of the common signs and symptoms that we know around mental health issues that often go unnoticed or ignored in daily life. I've come up against this with a personal knowledge, and through that happening, we have become more involved in this. Now we understand, as an autistic woman, I use a lot of energy every day neuromasking. And for those of you who are listening to this discussion and you're not familiar with these terms, neuromasking, as a neurodivergent person, we tend to try to fit into society. We now know statistically that 80% of the population is what we call neurotypical, and 20% of the population is neurodivergent like I am. And for my entire life, many decades, I wore a mask. And that was what we call neuromasking, because I tried desperately to fit in. with society and really worked to figure out how I would be able to be normal. Well, I'm happy to say that now I understand about my autism and ADHD and dyslexia, and I know that my brain is wired way differently than the neurotypical population. And because of that, I'm able to take that mask off and live my true self. This is one thing that we have seen over and over with the neurodivergent population. And one thing that happens, it's very common to have a higher incidence of anxiety and depression because of this. So the societal norms and cultural expectations.
Yeah. Yes. Plus, I would hasten to add that she's much more beautiful without her mask on.
Yeah. I think that's the main problem, and that's the dilemma, that the society does not accept anyone who actually does not fit in, and that's why people leave their uniqueness, their strength behind, and try to fit in the society, which is not suitable for them. Because neurodivergent people, or you may say that any other person who is a little different, society actually rejects them, and that is the reason why that builds this stigma, because whoever thinks that they are a bit different, they think that they won't be accepted, right?
Yes, and Ambreen, I would add a little bit to that. As a neurotypical, a neuroprevalent, you might hear both of those terms. You also hear allistic, which is the same thing, neurotypical. We have a role in this as well, because we have to be very conscious all the time, especially if you're in a couple, if you're coupled. You have to be aware of the fact that your mate may very well be masking. And in order for them to remove that mask, they have to trust you. That's a very, very important thing. And so that's something to look for. And that's also directly tied to, as Mariah said, depression and anxiety and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'll actually address Jennifer, especially you talk about the silence and surrounding the mental health and education system, and also you talk about your work is around it's like neurosciences, like the way brain works, right? So how does this lead to bullying, or leads to mental health conditions?
Yeah, well, so I was interested in what Heather was saying, because I share with her that active speaking up, an active saying, this is not okay, this is wrong, this is illegal, this is absolutely unfair. And both of us have suffered significant retaliation as a result. And it takes a massive amount of courage to stick to your program. So for me, the writing of The Bullied Brain, I had two sides to it, Ambreen, that obviously you and I have talked about before, but I really tried to go into that place of, we have to understand how much damage is done to the brain. It might be an invisible injury, but the damage is physical and serious. And most of us don't know. I mean, in a sense, we're all wearing masks because we aren't seeing what's going on in our brains, and we're not openly talking about it. And we live in a society that doesn't know anything about the brain. It's not part of the education system. It's not taught in the workplace. And of course, so we're afraid of our mental health because we don't even have a vocabulary for it or an understanding. We don't have the same things about our heart health. Nobody's covering up the fact that they have diabetes or a torn ACL. But as soon as it comes to a brain issue, it's like, it's like mythology and spiritualism and all kinds of things sort of kick in this unhealthy way. And so, as I share with Heather this idea, and obviously everybody on this talk knows this and has been through it probably, we suffer at the hands of others, and we do hurtful things to other people because we don't understand how much damage we're doing. And so really, when we want to see massive societal change, like change in our police force, change in our education system, change in how we work with people who are suffering, it all really has to go to the part, like in my book, I call the subtitle is Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. because all of us need to participate collectively in this act of going, hey, how do we help each other's brains stay really healthy and really safe? And how can we keep our own brains healthy and safe? As soon as we start in that new model, I think we're going to see so much change.
Yeah. I mean, that the thing is that we need to start thinking or taking seeing things differently in a way that we need to understand the other's perspective instead of forcing our perspective on others, right? That's how we can heal together. Very valid point. Heather, I would like to ask you also, I mean, as we are discussing this, that mental health gets affected when we try to fit in to the society, and it actually impacts our entire well-being, and you have gone through it. So can you share some light on that, and how it affects personal relationship, family dynamics, and how it impacts the entire well-being?
Absolutely. And I really like this question, and enjoy hearing what everyone's saying as well. It's very helpful to myself, and I'm sure the listeners as well. I know when I was first diagnosed, I didn't understand the illness or the injury. I had no real grasp on it. So as I was learning about what I was diagnosed with, my entire workplace had found out about what I had been diagnosed with and breached my privacy. And so at the same time that I was learning what I was now experiencing, everyone else was kind of making their own judgments and assumptions, and all those things were going on. And so, with so many triggers and things that you don't necessarily recognize right away. And it takes a long time. And I was going through many hills and valleys of those experiences with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, very high levels of that I was going through. I was hiding a lot for my safety and well-being. But also I was afraid of my own mind. I didn't understand it anymore. I didn't know how to interact with people. I was ashamed of what was occurring, and I didn't recognize myself. So when you wake up every day and you're looking at yourself and you don't understand why your mind is acting a certain way when it never had been in the past, you're really trying to find yourself again, or I was trying to find myself again. And so also during that time, I was having to explain to people why this has happened. And, it's really overwhelming. Also now when I speak, I get a lot of flashbacks of what has happened. So sometimes I think I've said something and actually I've just seen it and I haven't expressed it. So there's a lot of various things that I go through, and I personally never know when is a good time to tell people about what I'm experiencing, because sometimes I think I've said something, but I've just seen it. And then I have to follow up perhaps with an email saying, this is actually important as well. I missed it. And it wasn't that it wasn't important, but it was just something that was obviously sitting in my subconscious mind. So there's a lot of things going on in my mind constantly now that people can't see. And, it sometimes is perceived as maybe less knowledge that I'm providing to people about my expertise, but really there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, I think, for me. And when people can understand that, because I can write so much more fluidly and more expressively sometimes than when I can speak about what's going on, just presently.
Yeah, I think that's one thing you actually highlighted, a very valid point here, that that people take it very differently and they start judging, and that puts extra pressure on the person who's been going through such mental health problem, that they actually withdraw from the situation. Like, we have all been in a situation kind of mental trauma, or some when feeling depressed or anxiety. The reason why people don't speak up is because that they have this fear of being judged, and at the same time they don't know how to actually tackle them and tackle their own problems. So they actually withdraw from everything and go into the silos where actually they that's why they prefer to actually suffer in silence and not seeking help. Now, I would actually like to ask a question from Barbara. I know, like you are not directly linked with mental health, but you have been you have been in touch with kids and younger generation, right? Through your dog therapy and through your
Yeah.
training sessions. So, what you felt that, especially like when we had the conversation about that, how you helping kids, those who are not even actually vocal about it, that but a little bit of encouragement given, they started to change. So, what do you think? What are the pressure on them? How it is affecting their mental health?
So I think that I also need to mention that I have my experiences also connect to the fact that my daughter is autistic and she's already 17. So I've been going through these experiences. And so I see educational system through two types of lenses: as a professor, a former teacher, and also as a parent. And I see that in schools, and I can't speak about all the schools, I can speak about the school I have experience with, but I think many of them are like that. Again, autistic children, children who are a little bit different, whose behaviors sometimes they cannot stop because these behaviors are intensely attached to their conditions. They are asked to stop those behaviors. They are asked to adjust to the so-called norm, which who even can say what the norm is? And this is putting a lot of pressure on these children. I've seen what it did to my daughter. And I think that if we want to really, truly have better education, we have to ask ourselves, everybody in this world, really, and definitely people who are in charge of education, before you introduce any kind of changes in education, whatever you do in the classroom, teachers themselves too should ask themselves, what does it do to the mental health of every child in my community, in my classroom community? If it doesn't do anything good, you should not really do it. We need to look at education and educational achievement through the lens of mental health. And I think that what we also need to do, we need to equip children with real strategies of how to understand and how to think about those who behave a little bit differently in a little bit different way. That is why one of the reasons why I wrote my children's book about my dog, teaching children how to see brilliance in another child who might look differently, act differently, and is not able to change this behavior instantly. That is just so important. There is a way of benefit from somebody else's different behavior. And I give just one example. Uh, my daughter used to say a lot about her interests because many autistic children, when they're interested in something, they extensively talking about those interests. And who do they talk to about those interests? Well, to other children, right? And they think it's cool, it's awesome. They don't understand it. They're talking too extensively. And other children just don't like it. They think it's annoying. So my daughter just learned that everybody in the classroom was calling her that she's annoying. And of course, I can tell my daughter, and my role is to tell her that, well, maybe you can try talk a little bit less. That's because others don't understand you. But it's really hard when you don't have support from another side, from school, from teachers. And some teachers were supportive, but we need to understand, try to understand others, and also teach children how they can see benefits from interacting with others who are a little bit different. And there are a lot of benefits because many autistic children are actually even geniuses. They are brilliant in many areas. I can learn from someone who is brilliant in that one area I am not skilled at, but we need to be aware of this. If we don't know something, we don't know something, and we're not going to help children in becoming better um, to each other. And another thing I have noticed when I bring my dog to the classroom, she really influences the whole classroom community. Classroom community becomes more inclusive. Children, we've seen children together with my wonderful collaborating teacher, we've seen children who didn't work with each other because of loving my dog and treating my dog as the best friend. And that is another area that we should also seriously look into, how we can introduce animals who can really help in establishing better classroom communities. And it can be done in safe and responsible ways.
Yeah, that you actually brought in a very good point here, that most of the time people are misunderstood and they don't know how to do this. And like Ronald has actually shared a comment that I had a therapist who had never mentioned neurodivergence. My life was weirdo and outsider and poor self-image and shame. I'm just wired differently, and suffered emotional neglect through unawareness. So now actually I want to ask, especially Mariah and Byron, that, that people who are actually going through such differences or going through these problems like maybe depression, anxiety, or neurodivergence, what strategy would you recommend for them, that how they should develop a strength or a courage to speak about it, when especially society is not very much accepting them? So please tell us that how they can actually cope up with this.
Yeah, Amber, very good question. Excellent question. The first thing, speaking of society, I would just add that there are cultural differences in how we see mental illness and all the ramifications of that. And for example, in our society, mental illness there's still a stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but there is. And so people might tend to feel like they're isolated or cast aside, or like Barbara's daughter, they may, just because they're neurodivergent, people make assumptions about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad because it's just not true. And one of the downsides of that cultural difference, like here in the US, we're expected to be independent. We're expected to be strong and for ourselves, and to always be on and to be available at all times in all of our capacities. And what that can do is it can really delay treatment, number one. Yes. And anytime we delay treatment, Jennifer can probably address this better, but it probably makes the matter worse. I'm no expert, but I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so men in particular, in this country at least, we are taught, don't ever be vulnerable. Always be strong. And women, on the other hand, are taught, don't show your emotions. Don't show your agency. Don't ever show your fear. Keep it all in. And these things are not helpful for mental health. Also, while I'm on this topic, if you'll allow me just a second.
Sure.
I'm going to go way off topic here. In the U.S. military, I can't speak for others, but in the U.S. military, because of depression and anxiety, there are 20 suicides every single day.
Oh my God.
And so if this feature still exists, I think it does, there is a hotline for this that people can use. It's 988. And I think that's still, Jennifer is shaking her head. Is that still true?
They've just done that in Canada, where there's a 988 suicide line as well.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, yes, very, very good point that, that the reason why the people delay it, and then it actually makes the situation more worse than that. And I think, Jennifer, you can actually share more expertise in that, because you know that how it is impacting, like, especially you have also experience in working with the people, that why people do that and how it affects, and how it actually, especially you work with the bullies, and like, like how it affect the entire structure of the brain, and so how they can actually cope up with that, like especially when the damage is done, so how they can overcome that.
Yeah, so what I wrote about in my book, The Bully Brain, is this idea that we need to shift from a moral way of talking about mental health and move it into a medical way of talking. And that's not to say that when people hurt each other or someone does self-harm, it doesn't mean that there isn't accountability. In fact, there's more accountability. So if I had COVID and I didn't tell anybody as a teacher, and I went into a school and I infected all my students, that's a medical problem and it's a moral problem. It's moral because I willingly, knowingly, I know that there's this virus and I infected others. Well, that's the same thing as if I was a teacher or a police officer or in a university or a child in a classroom, even as Barbara's pointing out. If I willfully go and hurt other people, it peer-to-peer is one thing, but when you've got all the power and the prestige and the trust of a role like an educator, and you're maltreating people, you're infecting a whole group of people in your power. And that's very serious, and it's medical. You are actually making them ill. We have extensive research, 20 years at least of research, that shows that adverse treatment of children in particular leads to all kinds of health issues. It affects the heart, the blood pressure, the gut, the lungs. You are susceptible to not just things like suicide, you're susceptible to chronic illness, and your lifespan is going to be shortened. How is that not a medical public health crisis of epic proportions? Yeah. And so I think this is really where we need to shift our mentality. And I just want to add a quick thing on what everyone has said. Barbara in particular, you really sparkled this for me, is we need to teach children that every single brain is as unique as the fingerprints. None of us have typical brains or normal brains, or we don't. We all have these unique brains. And it's this it's almost like a spiritual thing in the sense that everyone has a purpose. Everyone has something special. Everyone has a journey and something to contribute in their own unique way. And we should be so curious and teach kids to be curious about people's unique brains and learn as much as they can about how the world is constructed and seen from someone else's selfhood.
Yeah, amazing. Like, I love what you said, especially like this needs to be taken as a medical actually emergency or urgency. Like, as like Byron pointed out, like 20 suicide in a day, which is too much. And it's like so heartbreaking to hear this, because, like all other, like people often died because of the chronic illness, because they couldn't have the cure or something. Suicide is something which is curable, which is preventable, 100%. There is no way one cannot be prevented from suicide. And there is nothing wrong in just continuing your life, because maybe this is just one bad chapter of life, and that's it. And that bad chapter is actually there to teach you a lesson. Once you learn from that, I'm sure the other chapter would be far better than what you have gone through in this previous chapter. So whoever is even listening, like in our audience, like, who may be feeling some hopelessness or having depression or anxiety, I mean, just you need to know that these are just curable things. It's just like medical, like, for example, as like Jennifer said, if someone has the COVID, they may get some pills and they get treated, and it's just like that. Maybe you go to the counselor, you go to therapist, and you will be 100% better than what you're feeling right now. So moving on to Heather, because your leadership is so brave, you give courage to the people to pursue their dreams, to pursue their path. So what is your advice on how one can develop that kind of courage? Because I know that you have gone through a lot, especially when you were going through those traumas during your career, when you had the PTSD and like the way people were treating you. So how to actually deal with those kind of judgments, anxiety, and then, have that courage to speak about it and have that courage to move on.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a really big challenge. I'm not going to downplay it. Every day was definitely, I was in survival, and that's what it felt like, right? Every day was in survival. But what I realized was I could see the effects of what people were feeling from what I was going through, right? I could see how it was affecting, my family and their mental health. And so I could also see how it was affecting other policewomen who were coming forward and standing up, and they're brave. And so I finally came to the conclusion that if I did not save myself and do all the things to do that and put everything into it, I was never going to find myself again. And therefore, if I couldn't find myself again, how was I going to help others again? And so that was really the driving factor, to be able to learn everything that I can learn, right? I investigated background. That's exactly what I did, right? I read and listened to everything I possibly could. So really starting to understand through my doctor, like, the practices that are out there in the world holistically, in Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, through breath work, mindfulness, meditation, acupuncture. I did a lot of acupuncture. Pretty sure he helped save my life. I went there quite often, and there was a lot of needles going into my body. And so it really, re-energizing yourself and the energy that you need. And the biggest part of it was my mind, right? There was constantly that cycle of negativity that continued to just be the force trying to take me down. And so I quickly realized that I needed to, fix my mind and take that dark cloud away. So if I was putting Post-it notes everywhere in my house of positive affirmations and mantras, then that's what I was doing. What was I listening to? It was going to be positive and uplifting. I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't watching the news. I wasn't surrounding myself with anything that was toxic. I had stopped drinking. I had put all those things down to be able to save my life. And so that's what we need to do. That's what others need to do. We have to disconnect from all the negative, energy that's coming towards us, because our body feels all of it. And so we need to, I really felt like my cells were going to just, disintegrate, because I was seeing physical symptoms in my body, bumps on my head, zaps to my head from stress all over my body. And so there were signs saying that illness was going to come if you do not take care of yourself. And there was some medication that was prescribed to me, but it had negative effects on me. I woke up in the middle of the night after 3 days of taking it, and it said, go kill yourself. Like, that's what I thought, you know what, this isn't for me. I took a holistic practice. Not everyone needs to do that, but that's what I did, because I wanted to feel what I was experiencing. And there's so much out there right now. I do now electromagnetic therapy, which also helps quite a bit to bring down the inflammation and what it is that we're intaking, right? What foods are we putting into our body? What nutrition do we need? What vitamins, what supplements? I did a lot of Epsom salt baths. I did a lot of reading, a lot of listening to audios, on leadership and motivational speakers that could really bring up my vibration. If I wasn't able to focus on reading, the audiobooks really helped, and podcasts. So, all of the things that people say, they really work, but you have to do it on a daily basis. This is not a short-term fix. Like, I have to stay on top of this every day for the rest of my life. This is not going to change, but this is my insulin, right? For what people need for their injuries, this is what I need to make sure that my mind is not going back to have those thoughts of depression. It's so important for us to recognize our signs and not be ashamed of them. I talk about them openly quite often with my family, and I try to do it in a way that they now have accepted, a long time now, what my new normal is. And so that's just something that I've normalized, and that we can normalize in any part of our life. And I do that with my friends and everyone I speak with. So, and that really helps, being open about it and not being ashamed about it. It really has made a difference.
Wow, this is amazing. I mean, you do a lot of work, and it is like, especially having the courage and the passion to actually find out how you can come out from the situation and how you can deal with those situations. And that is definitely, this is really inspiring to hear, that the way you've been like putting these post-it notes around and listening to the podcast, like especially this magnetic therapy. I mean, this is really amazing. And like, people think that these things don't work, but it does work. It's all about the mind. And as you mentioned that, we need to change the mindset to see the positivity in the environment, because sometimes when things are not going right, it's only us that we need to be in control and be in the calm, only then you'll be able to actually stay in control of the situation. So that's lovely. I would actually ask Barbara, especially she has the experience with like autistic kid, and especially she has the experience with the um, with the kids. So what actually strategies do you actually uh, apply to deal with these kind of like mental health situation, especially maybe like anxiety or something? You're on mute, Barbara.
Here you go. I always do
Okay,
that.
no problem. It's fine.
I think again that the biggest strategy, because I like to look at everything, I like to take everything as a big picture, is how we educate children starting from early childhood education. That is really the key. And we all know, for instance, we know right now from research, from observations, why kids are bullied and why bullies bully, right? We know
Yes.
that
Yes.
there is something dysfunctional with bullies, something psychological. Again, I'm not a psychologist. There are reasons why they bully other children or adults bully other adults. And we also know why sometimes certain children are victims of those bullies. They are vulnerable. There is something something that makes them sometimes being an easy target. So I think knowing this as teachers and as educators and school administrators in the whole world, we really have to do something about it as early as possible. Right now, I can speak mostly about the United States. Right now, we coming back in education to the idea of really looking at and teaching social and emotional skills. Why are we talking about this now? Why now? This should have been a subject of conversations, strategies, teaching strategies for a long time. Why were we going back to something that should have been a part of education for as long as we can think about education, really, and especially in our modern times? So why going back to this now? That is really not a good sign. And again, I can only speak about education in the United States, but then we know in other systems in the world, such as Finnish system in Finland, it's a educational system that has been performing very well. We know that over there, children and early education is really treated so seriously. The impact of play, focus on the play. Children are not in school all day long. They don't have piles of homework. All of these things really influence how the child feels about themselves and really automatically influences their achievement. Raising test scores, extending school day, giving more homework, these things are not improving our children's well-being and not improving their educational outcomes either. So we really have to put a lot of impact on this. And there is something that's called special education. Those who are in the United States know what it is. There are equivalents of special education probably all over in the world in the classrooms. But again, not that I'm saying that Finnish educational system is the one we all should follow, but they're doing something definitely good. So we should really take a look at what they're doing. And what they're doing is special education is for every child in early childhood. Every child has access to special education, not to be labeled as special education student, but to have access to individualized help that ensures that children learn how to read better, how to write. If they have any kind of issues, weaknesses in terms of achievement, special education is there to help them in getting better, in improving. That's what special education is for. is not for labeling children. And we know that autistic children, all of them end up in special education. And they don't, when you ask my daughter, they don't think special education is to help them. They don't. They know very well. They know how to identify how educational system works, and it doesn't work for their benefit. They cannot be fooled. And that is a very interesting case here. They know better what's happening than anybody else, I think. So why don't we involve even children and teenagers in designing school experiences and education for them? They deserve to be a part of these conversations, not just adults. I hate to say it, but so far, adults have not really done so well worldwide in designing good education.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely brilliant point here, Barbara. I completely agree with you that there's so many gaps in the education system, which actually makes them frustrated, makes them like more prone to develop into these these mental health conditions. So I completely agree with you and love these points that you shared here. So,
and if I may add, Brain,
yeah, sure.
when I'm talking about children's inner voice, I think about Brain's son and his brilliant book, The
Thank
Curious
you.
Giraffe.
Thank
We need
you.
to make sure that the book is even more popular than now, because this is one of those brilliant children's voices, and we need more children as participants in changing the educational system. It's time that they are included. They're not just children. It's about them.
Yes, 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 completely agree because that's what happened. I mean, my son is not a neurodivergent, but actually he can feel it. The thing is that there's also a difference between someone who's more active and someone who is maybe a little different from them because, I actually teach everything to my kids as well. So, they know what's happening. And I've seen that, when you teach them, like as an adult, not like as a kid, or when you involve them in the decision making, they will actually they will inspire you. And to be honest, they help me. And I can share my experience. Like when I was even writing my first book, I used to consult with my kids about, that what do you think about this? Like, especially I will share when I was writing my chapter on like soul and intuition, I used to take their opinion, and believe me, they come up with such brilliant answers that really, enlighten my mind. So I completely agree that, kids needs to be, involved in all these things. So moving on to further discussion, especially like I will move to like Byron and Mariah, that now we're talking about like especially like how the systems can be changed, and we talk about now like communities, like as a community or as an individual, like we are more aware, we talk about it, or even those people who maybe are listening to our show, how they can be more proactive in helping someone to reduce the stigma or to break that silence, how they can like I would say like we are people who are more aware of it, how they can help others.
Yes, excellent point, Amber. Thanks for that question. And I guess as soon as you said that, what I thought about was kind of another elephant in the room. We don't talk about money. And I don't know what the situation is in everybody else's geography, wherever they are. But in our culture, the amount of money in our healthcare budget for mental health is shameful. And unless we can address that, I think it's going to continue, as Jennifer said, it's going to continue to be seen as a mental problem and not a medical problem. We don't value things we don't spend money on. And so I think that's, however, we need to get our voice out there and talk to our legislators, get the word out, and try to get more money in healthcare budgets. And who knows, that may reduce the amount of money needed in other parts of the budget. I'm no expert, but it looks to me like that would reduce other elements of that budget.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, one of the things that occurs to me, and I don't know, I'm not an expert, I don't know anything about this, but if we had that extra funding, could it be we could afford to put nurses in schools again with that kind of skill set? I don't know.
Or counselors. One thing that I want to add here, Ambreen, is I'm big on language and words having weight. And I want to suggest that perhaps all the governments around the world invest in having mental health programs instead of spending in their budgets. Think of it as an investment in your society and how quickly we can help the people that are in need, and then work through and with other people to create programs that work.
Yeah, amazing. That's very valid point. And you have actually addressed the right, like, this is the elephant in the room. Like, nobody talks about it, especially the money. And it is a shame that they actually spend peanuts on mental health. Nobody talks about it, although it's a major issue. I think it's a time that we need to talk more about it and to gain more attention. And then they need, like, especially companies and the other who are willing to spend like millions of dollars on their maybe some ad campaign, they need to put some more efforts and money to it. Yes, Heather, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add it. I mean, I had coverage for psychological services, and it's quite large as a police officer. However, to heal my mind, body, and soul and my spirit, there was so many other things that I wanted to do to be able to take the holistic side, to heal myself long-term, to have long-term results and all the things that I talked about. And that was huge amounts of money, right? That is not something that anyone can afford, especially, adding in kids or any other, things that they might be having to attend to medically for those things. But yes, I absolutely agree with you. It's the costs are so high, but on the other side of it, what you get from all of those services are just so beneficial. So I agree with you. There should be some more balance there.
Yeah, very true, very true. Like, again, like, moving on to this topic, Jennifer, what's your view on that how we can support as a community, as an individual, to break the stigma?
Well, I think, as everyone has expressed brilliantly, it's really a mindset shift that has to happen. I mean, we're a society that you can see it in funding, you can see it in school, you can see it in medical care, you can see it in the fact that our legal system, if I went to work and a colleague broke my leg, that would be instant firing in the workplace. But if I went to work and was sexually harassed, and it caused me to have all kinds of internal problems, extreme anxiety, loss of self-esteem, inability to be productive, hypervigilance, you name all the traumas that happen to the brain from that, the legal system would not step in on my behalf. In fact, it would make me feel like it was my fault. So we've got this problem, like the brain does not receive the same kind of funding. It doesn't get to speak in education just because it's under development. It doesn't get the protections it needs in the workplace, and it doesn't get the medical care it needs. So this is our big obstacle. And, I think the most concerning statistic is from 2000 to 2018 in the United States, youth suicide. So that's 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds. Youth suicide has increased 57%. And that shows us with a big red flag that we're doing everything wrong with our kids. And it's not from lack of love. It's not from lack of good intention. It's not from lack of resources. It's because we ignore the brain. And our kids are telling us that, you couldn't more eloquently say that the internet and social media 24/7 a day and a kid face-to-face with a screen is a healthy thing. It's not. And youth suicide rates show us that. So this is why I think we're also thankful to you, Ambreen, for bringing us together and letting us have these conversations and get this information out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's very alarming. And it's so, so sad to hear that a 57% increase, and especially like in youth, 10 years to like 18 years. I mean, this is really, really heartbreaking. And actually, you know what, I tell you that especially when me and my son was started writing this, like, is the one thing that actually triggered us, like, the reason why that we just said, okay, we have to do it, because there was a suicide case that was here in our country, like in Saudi Arabia. We heard that, so she was only 10-year-old and she committed suicide. And that's like, because of course, we know that what could be the reason. And it was so heartbreaking. It's like, no, I think this is the time that we need to raise a voice against it. This is, we need to actually be more vocal about it, because somebody needs to hear it. I know that our voice is still very low, but I know it will be amplified through our collective efforts. So thanks to all of you for joining us on and sharing our voice against this very important topic. So I know, like, we can actually go on and on about this topic, because there is a lot to actually speak about it. We can just, you can name it, like suicide, anxiety, depression, neurodivergence. Like, we have just touched the surface of it. And when we go, it's just like, when we peeling the layers, it can actually get more ugly, but it needs to be, we need to start this conversation on that. And we will be doing this. And that's our main mission through Save Lives Project also, that we will be conducting such panel discussion to talk about these hard facts, these topics which nobody likes to talk. So I think that's going to help raise our voices to bring attention to this topic. So before we actually close the show, I would request each of you to share parting advice. One advice you want to give to our audience today to, protect their mental well-being, or maybe to help others to protect their mental well-being. I will start from Byron and Mariah. Yeah.
Well, Ambreen and everyone on the panel today, thank you so much for your insights. Such good information. One thing we always tell people is be on the lookout. When you know someone who closely and they act a little different, ask them. Be sure to speak up, because it's when we all are in it together and we look out for each other, that raises the awareness. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Byron, would you like to share any advice or?
Well, I just very quickly, I don't want to take other people's time, but one of the things we emphasize is that neurodivergence is not a deficit. It's a benefit, or at least it can be. So if we can move the needle in that direction, that will help, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely, because everyone is unique. So definitely. Okay, Jennifer, would you like to share your advice?
Yeah, I want to end saying that it's really important for everyone to know that our brains have neuroplasticity. That means they can change based on our environment and what we practice until our very last moment on the planet. And all of us can get our brains stronger and healthier and more empathic and more connected and more positive. And that's the brain is wired for repair and recovery. We just need to follow evidence-based practices. And so when I did the research on that, I was like, everybody needs to know this. This is so exciting. The brain, you can change it. So let's end on that.
Amazing. Yeah, everyone is in actually control. They can change whatever the situation they're in. So thanks for sharing the wonderful advice. Heather.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. For me, it's love, compassion, gratitude for yourself and others. We're all experiencing life and lessons at various stages. And just know there's so many lessons that come from our challenging times. And so to always brave your best.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great. Barbara.
So 2 quick things. First, I have to echo what Byron said and Mariah. Neurodivergent brains are very cool. We just need to give ourselves a chance to learn more about them, because there's so many benefits from interacting with neurodivergent people. And also another message is for parents, for teachers, for school administrators, for anybody connected to education, and we actually all are. is to encourage each other to ask ourselves maybe slightly different questions about education and how to improve it. Because if we only think about achievement, but we disconnect from, well, health brain and other incredible areas of expertise we are all talking about here during this panel, then we are never going to really help our children.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Absolutely. I agree with you. So thanks to everyone who joined from the audience from different part of the world, shared their comments, Valerie, Ronald, Veena, and so many others. So thank you so much. And most importantly, thanks to Byron, Mariah, and Barbara, Jennifer, and Heather for joining us today and enlightening us with your experience, with your wisdom, and with your insights. So thank you so much. And just one advice I would like to give to all audience today, that whatever the situation you are going through, sometimes it gets so overwhelming. Sometimes it seems that there's no way out, and you think that you can't do it alone. So seek help. It is always, I also shared this message on my LinkedIn today, that maybe just one message of like seeking help, it can transform your life. So please never be afraid, never be shy from seeking help. So thanks to everyone for joining, and hope to see you maybe like in few weeks about the.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Okay,
Amber.
thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you, Ambreen. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone. It was fabulous. Thank you.